Dr. Elena Vasquez had witnessed some truly spectacular displays of ignorance during her 15 years as a Z, but nothing quite prepared her for watching an 8-foot-tall crystalline being explained to a room full of alien cadets that humans could be killed by playing smooth jazz at frequencies above 20 kilohertz. She sat in the back row of the amphitheater, her biomask projecting the appearance of a standard Andromedan observer, trying very hard not to snort with laughter as Commander Vex continued his lecture on human termination protocols. "The carbon-based bipeds," Vex announced, his voice resonating through the chamber like wind chimes in a hurricane, "possess a critical weakness in their auditory processing centers. Exposure to what they call Kenny G will cause immediate neural collapse and death within 47 seconds. Elena bit down on her tongue so hard she tasted copper. Around her, the assembled cadets from 17 different species took diligent notes on their quantum tablets. A particularly eager Zephyrion in the front row raised 3 of its forearms. "Commander, what if the human has damaged hearing?" "Excellent question, Cadet Zix. In such cases, you must resort to their secondary weakness. Rapid exposure to mathematical concepts beyond basic arithmetic. Show them a calculus equation, and their primitive brains will literally explode." This time Elena did make a sound, a sort of strangled wheeze that she quickly covered by pretending to clear her respiratory filters. The irony wasn't lost on her that she held a doctorate in both theoretical physics and xen, and had personally developed the equations that allowed for faster-than-light communication between species. But sure, basic calculus would definitely make her head explode. The Kepler Station Academy had been her home for 3 months now. Ever since the diplomatic mission to the Cathari homeworld had gone sideways in the most spectacular fashion possible, what was supposed to be humanity's first official contact with the crystalline species had instead turned into an elaborate misunderstanding involving a mistranslated peace treaty, several tons of what the Cathari considered a deadly neurotoxin, but humans called vanilla extract, and Elena accidentally convincing an entire planetary council that she was a very sophisticated hologram. The result, Elena was now the galaxy's only undocumented human, technically classified as extinct by the Galactic Census Bureau, hiding in plain sight among beings who apparently thought her species was some sort of myth. The biomask technology, originally designed for deep-cover anthropological research, had become her lifeline. As long as she could maintain the facade of being Dr. Elena Vascari, a researcher from the Andromeda Collective, she could move freely through Cathari space. But freedom came with the peculiar torture of watching her own species being completely misrepresented in academic settings. "Now," Commander Vex continued, manipulating a holographic projection of what was presumably supposed to be a human anatomy chart but looked more like a medical diagram of a very confused octopus, "we move to their most vulnerable point. The emotional processing center. Humans, you see, are incapable of surviving prolonged exposure to logical thinking. Present them with a rational argument, and they will immediately begin to malfunction." A Corellian cadet with silver-scaled skin raised a webbed hand. "What constitutes a rational argument, sir? Anything involving evidence, basic cause and effect, or the concept that maybe, just maybe, reality doesn't revolve around their personal feelings." Elena had to admit that one stung a little because it wasn't entirely wrong. She thought about the current state of Earth's social media and winced internally. The lecture had been going on for 2 hours, and Elena was developing a newfound appreciation for the phrase comedy of errors. According to the Cathari military database, humans could be defeated by 1. Exposure to temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which would instantly freeze their internal fluids. 2. Showing them images of their own mortality, causing immediate existential collapse. 3. Feeding them any food not specifically designed for their consumption, as they had no natural immunity to foreign substances. 4. Playing music in minor keys, which disrupted their primitive emotional regulation systems. 5. Asking them to make decisions under pressure, as their neural architecture couldn't handle complex choices. Elena was particularly amused by item number 3, considering she'd spent the last week subsisting entirely on Cathari nutrition cubes that were apparently designed for silicon-based digestive systems. They tasted like someone had mixed chalk with regret, but they were keeping her alive just fine. The real kicker was that the Cathari weren't malicious. They genuinely believed humans were extinct, wiped out in some great catastrophe roughly 50 years ago, and they were preparing their military forces for hypothetical encounters with any surviving pockets of humanity. It was like watching someone prepare for a zombie apocalypse by studying zombie movies from the 1950s. Commander Vex activated another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be a human heart. If human hearts were the size of basketballs and had 17 chambers, the cardiovascular system, he intoned solemnly, is perhaps their greatest weakness. A human heart beats exactly 43 times per minute. Any deviation from this rhythm, caused by physical exertion, emotional stress, or exposure to caffeine, will result in immediate cardiac arrest. Elena's own heart was currently beating at roughly 90 beats per minute, mostly from the effort of not jumping up and shouting corrections. 43 beats per minute wasn't a heart rate, it was barely a pulse. At that speed, humans wouldn't be extinct, they'd be hibernating. She found herself genuinely curious about where the Cathari had gotten their information. It was so spectacularly wrong that it almost seemed intentional. The anatomical charts looked like they'd been designed by someone who had heard a third-hand description of human biology from someone who had never actually seen a human, but had once read a very inaccurate book about mammals. For our final demonstration, Commander Vex announced, we will simulate a standard human termination scenario. 2 cadets moved to the center of the amphitheater. 1, a tall reptilian being from the Vega system, was wearing what Elena could only assume was supposed to be human disguise. It looked like someone had dressed a dinosaur in business casual and given it a blonde wig. Cadet Renth will play the human, Vex explained. Cadet Yila will demonstrate proper termination technique. Cadet Yila, a gelatinous being that reminded Elena uncomfortably of sentient Gilo, approached the human and began ... singing, off-key in what sounded like a mixture of Klingon and dying whale song. The human is now experiencing auditory trauma, Vex narrated as Cadet Renth began to writhe dramatically. Notice how it clutches its cranial appendage in agony. This is the standard response to what humans call bad music. Elena couldn't argue with that assessment. Now Cadet Yila will administer the coup de grace, a basic mathematical equation. Cadet Yila held up a tablet displaying 2 + 2 = 4 in large, friendly numerals. Cadet Renth immediately collapsed, twitching spasmodically before going completely still. And thus, Commander Vex announced with satisfaction, a human is efficiently neutralized. The assembled cadets applauded politely. Elena sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she had just witnessed. It was like watching a nature documentary written by someone who had never seen nature. As the lecture concluded and the cadets began filing out, Elena found herself faced with a genuine moral dilemma. The Cathari weren't evil. They weren't planning to hunt down humans for sport or conquest. They were simply preparing for a possibility, and they were preparing very, very badly. If she walked away and said nothing, they would continue to believe the humans could be killed by Kenny G in basic math. On one hand, this made humans essentially invulnerable to Cathari military tactics. On the other hand, it also meant that any actual first contact scenario would be a disaster of epic proportions, but correcting them would mean revealing herself. And revealing herself could mean anything from imprisonment to dissection to being turned into some kind of diplomatic trophy. Elena watched Commander Vex packing up his holographic equipment and made her decision. "Excuse me, Commander," she said, allowing her biomask to flicker just enough to reveal her actual features. "I couldn't help but notice a few small inaccuracies in your presentation." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Commander Vex dropped his projection tablet, which shattered against the amphitheater floor with a sound like breaking wind chimes. The remaining cadets turned to stare. Several of them activated what Elena assumed were emergency communication devices. "You are," Vex managed, his crystalline form shifting through several different colors before settling on a sort of panicked purple. "You are a human." "Guilty as charged," Elena said, pulling off her biomask entirely. "Dr. Elena Bosca's xenobiologist, and living proof that your entire curriculum needs some serious revision." "But humans are extinct," one of the cadets whispered. "Greatly exaggerated," Elena replied. "We're actually doing quite well, thank you. About 12 billion of us at last count." Commander Vex had gone completely transparent, which Elena was fairly certain was the Cathari equivalent of a nervous breakdown. "Your lecture was fascinating," Elena continued, "but I feel obligated to point out that humans cannot, in fact, be killed by smooth jazz. Kenny G is annoying, yes, but not lethal. We also cannot be defeated by basic math, extreme cold, or logical thinking. Though I'll grant you the last one is sometimes questionable. How are you alive?" Cadet Yila asked, its gelatinous form quivering with apparent terror. "Well, for starters, my heart beats about 70 times per minute, not 40. I've been living on your nutrition cubes for 3 months without dying. I have 3 advanced degrees, which suggests my brain can handle mathematics just fine. And I once spent a winter in Minnesota, where temperatures regularly drop below 0 Fahrenheit, and I survived with nothing more than a good coat." The amphitheater was completely silent except for the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. "I don't understand," Commander Vex said finally. "Our data is hilariously wrong," Elena finished. "Where did you even get it?" "The Great Archive, historical records from the First Contact War 50 years ago." Elena frowned. "What First Contact War?" "The conflict that wiped out your species. When humans attacked our exploratory vessels with their primitive weapons." A terrible suspicion began forming in Elena's mind. "Commander, what exactly did these primitive weapons look like?" Vex activated a new holographic display showing what appeared to be some kind of projectile weapon. Elena stared at it for a long moment before starting to laugh. "That's not a weapon," she said between giggles. "That's a trumpet." "A what?" "A musical instrument." "Commander, I think your people might have encountered a parade." The silence that followed was deafening. 50 years ago, Elena continued, Earth sent out its first deep space cultural exchange mission. They were specifically instructed to make peaceful contact through music and art. If I had to guess, your exploratory vessels probably encountered a brass band playing a welcome song." Commander Vex had now gone from transparent to a sort of mortified orange. "Yeah, he said slowly. That we have spent half a century preparing for war against a species that was trying to throw us a party. It would appear so. Elena looked around at the assembled cadets, all of whom seemed to be experiencing various forms of existential crises. Here's what I don't understand, she said. How did you not know there was an actual human on your station? I've been here for 3 months. Commander Vex's color shifted to what Elena was beginning to recognize as embarrassment. We did know. I'm sorry. What? Dr. Vascari, we have known you were human since the moment you arrived on Kepler Station. Elena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach, then why ... This entire exercise was a test. When we discovered that a human had somehow survived and made their way to our space, the council decided to evaluate your species' character. Would you reveal yourself to correct dangerous misinformation, even at personal risk? Would you prioritize truth over self-preservation? You've got to be kidding me. The data in our archives was deliberately falsified for this demonstration. We needed to present information so obviously incorrect that no reasonable being could ignore it. So you do know that Kenny G isn't lethal. We have never heard of Kenny G, but we assumed any species capable of interstellar travel would not be vulnerable to musical assassination. Elena sat down heavily in one of the amphitheater seats. This has been one very elaborate job interview, hasn't it? The council has authorized me to offer you a position as the first human Cathari cultural liaison, Commander Vex said, his coloration shifting to what Elena hoped was pleased. Pending your acceptance, we would like to extend formal diplomatic relations to Earth, and if I had failed your test, then we would have quietly arranged for your safe return home with a polite note that we were not yet ready for contact. Elena looked around at the alien faces surrounding her, all waiting for her response. She thought about Earth, about her lab, about her comfortable life studying theoretical xenobiology, ever expecting to actually meet any aliens. Then she thought about the sheer absurdity of the past 3 months, about the adventure of being the only human in a galaxy full of beings who thought her species could be killed by mathematics, about the opportunity to build bridges between worlds that had spent 50 years preparing for a war that had started with a marching band. Do I get to rewrite your human studies curriculum? She asked. Completely, Commander Vex assured her. And fix that anatomy chart, because that thing gave me nightmares. Absolutely, Elena grinned. Then I accept. But I have one condition. Name it. Next week I want to show you all what humans call a comedy movie. I have a feeling you're going to love the Marx Brothers. Commander Dex's form shifted through several colors before settling on what Elena was learning to recognize as anticipation. We look forward to this cultural exchange. As the assembled cadets began chattering excitedly in different languages about the first official human-alien diplomatic mission, Elena reflected on the strange turns life could take. She'd started the day as a hidden refugee, attending a hilariously inaccurate military lecture. She was ending it as an ambassador to the stars. And somewhere in the space between Kenny G and calculus, between fear and curiosity, between species separated by light years and brought together by the simple human impulse to correct someone who was wrong on the internet, the galaxy had become a much smaller and more interesting place.